kindness returned. He helped 2 orphans. 10 years later, they came in a luxury starship. The sky above the mining colony was always the same color, a dusty orange, filled with the taste of metal in the air. Machines hummed day and night, digging deep into the ground for rare minerals. Most people in the colony worked until their hands were rough and their backs hurt. Life was hard, and kindness was a rare thing here. Daniel Ross, a middle-aged mechanic, had lived in the colony for 20 years. He was a tall man with rough hands and a face marked by years of work. His workshop was small, but always busy. He fixed mining tools, broken vehicles, and sometimes even old Starship parts. Daniel didn't have much, but he lived simply, working and minding his own business. That evening, as the suns were setting and the colony streets grew quiet, Daniel was locking his workshop. He was about to leave when he heard a faint sound, like a weak cry coming from behind the scrap metal piles. He froze, listening carefully. The sound came again, softer this time, almost like someone trying not to be heard, curious and cautious. Daniel walked around the pile of broken parts. There, in the shadows, he saw 2 small figures huddled together. They were children, but not human children. Their skin had a faint silver glow, and their eyes shone like tiny moons. Their clothes were torn and dirty, and they looked tired, hungry, and afraid. Daniel's first thought was to call the colony guards. Strangers in the colony could mean trouble, and alien children could bring dangerous attention. But when he saw the fear in their eyes, he stopped. They didn't speak, just stared at him, shivering slightly. "You two, what are you doing here?" Daniel asked in a calm voice. The children didn't answer. Instead, one of them tried to stand, but almost fell. Daniel sighed and glanced around. No one else was nearby, and the streets were empty. He knelt down, pulling a small packet from his bag. Inside was his dinner, a piece of bread and some dried meat. He broke it into pieces and held it out. At first, the children didn't move, but then the smaller one reached out with trembling hands. They ate quickly, almost like they hadn't eaten for days. Daniel felt a knot in his chest. Something about their silence and their eyes told him they had been through more than any child should. He stood and said, "Come with me." The children looked at each other, unsure, but after a moment, they followed him. Keeping their heads low, inside his workshop, Daniel led them to a small room in the back. It wasn't much, just a bench, some tools, and a heating unit, but it was warm and hidden. He gave them water and an old blanket. "You can rest here tonight," he said. Still, they didn't speak, but their eyes softened a little as the night grew darker. Daniel worked quietly on an engine part. From the corner of his eye, he saw the children curl up under the blanket, their breathing slow and tired. For a moment, the workshop felt strangely peaceful, but then a sharp sound broke the quiet. Knocking at the door, hard and urgent. Daniel froze. He quickly covered the children with another cloth and whispered, "Stay quiet, don't move," walking to the door. He opened it just enough to see who it was. A tall man in dark armor stood there, his helmet reflecting the workshop lights. He held a scanner in one hand, its screen flashing. "Evening," the man said in a cold voice. "I'm looking for 2 runaways. Have you seen anyone unusual around here?" Daniel's mind raced. He forced a calm expression and shook his head. "No, just me," he replied, "and a broken water pump I'm trying to fix." The man narrowed his eyes. He stepped inside, his scanner beeping softly as it swept across the room. Daniel kept his hands steady, trying not to look toward the back room. After a long moment, the man turned toward the door. "If you see anything, report it," he said, his voice carrying a warning. When the man left, Daniel closed the door and locked it. He leaned against it, letting out a slow breath. In the back room, the children were still hidden, their eyes wide. Daniel gave them a reassuring nod. "You're safe for now," he said quietly, but in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. Outside, The colony was silent again, but Daniel could still hear the sound of the armored man's boots fading into the night. Somewhere out there, people were searching for these children, and if they found them, Daniel had no doubt it would end badly. He didn't know who they were, or why they were being hunted. All he knew was that 2 scared children had come to his workshop, and he couldn't turn them away. Daniel barely slept that night. Every small sound outside made him open his eyes. He kept checking the back room to see if the children were still there. They hadn't moved much, but he could tell they were restless. The smaller one's breathing was uneven, as if from fear or bad dreams. When morning came, the colony streets were already busy. Miners walked to work, traders opened their stalls, and repairmen shouted for parts. But in the air there was tension. Daniel noticed more guards than usual, moving in pairs, scanning faces. A few strangers in dark armor stood near the main gate, the same kind of armor he had seen the night before. He returned to his workshop, locking the door behind him. The older child was awake now, watching him with those silver glowing eyes. Daniel spoke softly. "They're searching for you." The child didn't answer, but gave a slow, nervous nod. Daniel leaned against the workbench, thinking, if the guards searched here, the children wouldn't have a chance. A knock came again, lighter this time, but still quick. Daniel's heart skipped. When he opened the door, it was not a soldier. It was his neighbor, Marla, holding a small toolbox. "You should be careful," she whispered, glancing around. "They're going door to door." Daniel forced a casual tone. "Looking for what?" Marla shrugged. "Runaways, I think. Maybe dangerous." After she left, Daniel walked to the back room. The children were sitting close together, eyes wide. He knew keeping them here would only work for so long. He grabbed an old metal plate from under his bench and pushed aside a heavy shelf. Behind it, a narrow panel slid open, a hidden storage space. "Inside," he told them. "Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." Minutes later, there was another knock, harder. Daniel opened the door to find 2 armored trackers. One of them held a small scanner that gave a faint red light. "Routine check," the taller one said, stepping inside without asking. They looked under tables, behind machines, even inside tool cabinets. Daniel stood still, forcing his face into a bored expression. "You think I'm hiding someone in this mess? Be my guest. You won't find anything worth stealing." The shorter tracker stopped near the hidden panel. Daniel's stomach tightened. The man tapped the wall, listening, but just then, the scanner on his partner's wrist beeped and flashed. They both turned toward the door, voices low and urgent. Without another word, they left, boots striking the dusty ground outside. Daniel waited until their footsteps faded before opening the hidden space. The children crawled out, both shaking slightly. "You can't stay here," he said. "They'll keep coming back." The older child finally spoke, the voice soft but steady. "If they find us, they will kill us." Daniel stared for a moment. He had suspected trouble, but not this. In the corner of his workshop sat a half-broken cargo skimmer. He had been meaning to sell 4 parts. It wouldn't win any races, but it could travel far enough to get beyond the colony scanners. Daniel's mind raced. Fixing it would take hours, maybe less if he worked without stopping. And if he did this, there would be no turning back. Outside, the colony went on as usual. But Daniel could feel it. The search was tightening, the danger growing closer. By nightfall, either the children would be far away, or they would be caught, and somehow, he knew their fate depended on what he did next. The day passed in a blur of noise and metal. Daniel worked on the cargo skimmer with a speed he hadn't used in years. Sparks flew as he cut away rusted panels and welded new plates into place. The children stayed close but out of sight, passing him tools when he asked. They didn't speak much, but their eyes followed every move he made. By evening, the skimmer's engine rumbled to life with a deep growl. It wasn't perfect, but it was fast enough to outrun a ground patrol. Daniel packed a small bag with water, dried food, and an old navigation chip. He placed it in the skimmer's storage hatch and looked at the children. "You'll need to leave tonight," he said, his voice low. Before they locked down the gates, the older ones shook their head, fear flickering in their glowing eyes. "They will follow," the child said quietly. "They always follow." Daniel knelt down, looking them both in the eye. "Maybe they will, but you'll have a better chance out there than here." Night fell quickly on the colony. The streets emptied, leaving only the sound of distant engines and the faint hum of the wind. Daniel led the skimmer out through a side gate used by traders. The guard there barely glanced at him. He knew Daniel's face and probably thought it was just another late repair job. They drove into the desert under twin moons. The skimmer bounced over rocky ground, kicking up clouds of red dust. The children sat in the back, wrapped in blankets against the cold. For a short while, there was silence, only the sound of the engine and the wind. Then, far behind them, lights appeared, small at first, but growing. Daniel's stomach tightened. Through the rear mirror, he could see the glow of two fast patrol bikes cutting through the darkness. "They've found us," he muttered, pushing the skimmer's throttle to its limit. The engine roared, but the bikes were closing in. A burst of light flashed past, burning a line into the sand, a warning shot. Daniel swerved hard, the skimmer rocking dangerously. The older child gripped the side rail and shouted something in a language Daniel didn't understand. The smaller one pulled something from under their shirt, a small silver device that shimmered faintly. "Hold on," the older child cried. The smaller one pressed the device against the skimmer's side. A moment later, a wave of pale light burst outward, bending in strange shapes. Behind them, the patrol bikes swerved wildly as their sensors scrambled. For a few precious seconds, the skimmer disappeared from their tracking systems. Daniel didn't slow until the lights behind them were gone. Breathing hard, he guided the skimmer into a canyon, hidden under jagged cliffs. The children sat in silence, their faces pale in the moonlight. Daniel stared at them, still trying to understand what had just happened. "What was that thing?" he asked. The older one simply said, "A gift from our parents. The last thing we had before they were taken." The wind howled through the canyon as they waited. Daniel knew this was only a small victory. Whoever was chasing them wouldn't give up. But for tonight, they had bought time, and sometimes, in the galaxy, time was the most precious thing you could have. 10 years had passed since that night in the desert. The colony had changed little, its streets still lined with rusted machines and sand-worn buildings. Daniel Ross was older now, his hair more gray, his hands more worn. He still worked in the same workshop, fixing broken engines and mining tools. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind outside howled, he thought of the two alien children and wondered if they had survived. Most people in the colony had forgotten. The bounty hunters, the desert had swallowed many stories, and this was just another. Life went on, slow, dusty, and predictable, until one evening, when the ground began to tremble. At first, Daniel thought it was a mining blast, but then came a low, deep sound, like the sky itself was shifting. People spilled into the streets, looking upward, from the clouds above. A shadow descended, massive, gleaming, and unlike any ship Daniel had ever seen. It was a luxury starship. Its hull shone like polished silver, with intricate gold patterns that caught the setting sun. Blue energy trails curved around its body like living rivers of light. It moved with a grace no mining vessel could match. The entire colony fell silent as it hovered above the landing field. The ship rotated slowly before settling down. Jets of white steam hissed from beneath, sending dust swirling in golden spirals. A long ramp extended, smooth and glowing faintly. Daniel's heart thudded in his chest as he joined the crowd gathering at the edge of the field. Two figures appeared at the top of the ramp, tall, dressed in deep royal blue uniforms lined with silver. Helmets covered their faces, reflecting the light. They walked side by side, their steps confident, their presence commanding. The air seemed to hum around them, as if the very ground knew these were not ordinary visitors. When they reached the bottom, both stopped. One of them slowly lifted their helmet. Daniel's breath caught. The face was older, stronger, but the silver glow in the eyes was unmistakable. It was the older child he had saved a decade ago. The second figure removed their helmet as well. The smaller one, now tall, their features sharp but warm, gave a smile Daniel remembered from years past. For a moment, he couldn't move. It was like a ghost from his own memories had stepped into the present. The taller one spoke first, voice steady, but filled with something unspoken. "Daniel Ross," they said, "we have returned." Every person in the crowd turned to look at him. Daniel felt the weight of all those eyes, but his focus was only on the two standing before him. They walked closer until they stood just a step away. The smaller one's voice was softer, almost breaking. "You gave us life when we had nothing," they said. "We never forgot." For a heartbeat, Daniel couldn't speak. His mind was a storm of questions: where they had been, what they had become, why they were here now. But before he could say a word, a deep, resonating horn sounded from the starship. Whatever this reunion was, it wasn't going to be simple. Daniel's boots felt heavy as he stepped forward. The crowd parted for him, their whispers a low tide of curiosity and awe. Up close, he could see how much the two had changed. Their faces carried the calm of people who had seen far horizons and survived storms. Yet in their eyes, he still saw the same children who had once shivered in his workshop. The taller one extended a gloved hand. Daniel hesitated, then took it. It was a firm grip, not the touch of a stranger, but of someone who had carried a promise for a long time. "We have traveled many systems to find you," the taller one said. Their voice held the weight of years, but also the warmth of something deeply personal. The smaller one stepped closer. Removing their gloves, their hands were no longer small or fragile. But when they reached out and touched Daniel's arm, the gesture was gentle. "You gave us more than food," they said quietly. "You gave us hope when the galaxy had none for us." Daniel's chest tightened. He had not thought of that night as something great, only a choice any decent person should make. The taller one turned and gestured toward the starship. "Please, come aboard," they said. "There is much to show you," the crowd murmured in astonishment as Daniel, looking almost unsure, stepped onto the glowing ramp beside them. Inside, the ship was unlike anything he had imagined. Soft light glowed from the walls, changing in gentle colors like breathing. Long corridors curved in elegant arcs, leading to rooms filled with strange beauty, gardens floating in zero gravity, fountains that spilled into the air and hung like glass before vanishing. He caught glimpses of alien crew members, their uniforms marked with the same silver-gold emblem the two wore. Each one bowed slightly as they passed, their eyes holding a respect Daniel couldn't understand. They led him into a large chamber, with wide windows that opened to the stars. Beyond them, nebula clouds swirled in deep blues and golds. The smaller one spoke first. "After we left you, we were taken in by allies of our people," they explained. "We learned, we fought, we rose in rank, and one day, we became leaders." Daniel turned toward them, brow furrowed. "Leaders?" he asked, as if the word didn't quite fit the children he remembered. The taller one gave a faint smile. "Yes, leaders of an interstellar alliance," they said, "and with that power, we could find the one man who once hid us from death." Daniel looked back out at the stars, feeling small in a way he hadn't since his youth. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why come back for an old mechanic from a dust colony?" The smaller one stepped closer, their voice steady now. "Because kindness is the rarest force in the galaxy," they said, "and when it is given freely, it becomes something greater than any empire." Daniel was about to speak, but then the starship's lights dimmed slightly. A soft chime echoed through the walls, followed by a voice over the intercom. "High commanders, enemy vessels detected on approach." The taller one exchanged a glance with their sibling. The warmth in the room cooled, replaced by something sharper, whatever reason they had for bringing Daniel here. It had just become urgent. The ship's hum deepened, a low vibration running through the floor beneath Daniel's boots. Through the wide windows, points of light appeared in the distance, not stars, but moving shapes, growing larger by the second. The taller one's voice was calm but firm. They found us sooner than expected. Daniel turned, confused. Who? Raiders, the smaller one said, their tone carrying a quiet anger. The same kind of hunters who chased us as children, but now they have a fleet. Daniel's mind flashed back to the sound of armored boots outside his workshop. To the knock at his door all those years ago. Crew members moved quickly, holographic maps lighting up around the chamber. The taller one gestured for Daniel to follow them into a side room. Inside was a circular platform with a sleek metallic chair in its center. Around it, faint rings of energy hovered in the air, shifting like ripples in water. "This is for you," the taller one said. Daniel stared at the chair, then at them. "For me. I'm no pilot, and I've never used." The smaller one cut him off with a faint smile. "It's not for fighting. It's for living," they explained in simple words. The chair was a life support interface, designed to heal and strengthen the body. Once connected, it could reverse years of damage, extend life, and adapt the user for travel between worlds. It was their gift to him. 10 years ago. "You gave us the chance to live," the taller one said. "Now we give it back to you, 100-fold. Daniel looked at the chair, unsure. A deep vibration passed through the ship, followed by the distant boom of weapons fire. Crew voices came. Through the comms urgent now. Shields at 70%. Incoming wave. The smaller one stepped forward, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "If you sit now, you'll be ready to leave with us when this is over," they said. "But if you stay behind, you'll face what's coming without us." Through the open doorway, Daniel caught a glimpse of the approaching ships on the main display. Dark, sharp silhouettes cutting across the starlight. Dozens of them. The colony back on the dusty world. Flashed through his mind. People working, children running between market stalls. He clenched his jaw. "Can this ship protect the colony?" he asked. The taller one's eyes met his. "Yes," they said simply. "With you here, we will." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. Then, slowly, he stepped toward the chair, the hum of the ship surrounding him. Outside, the enemy fleet drew closer. But in that instant, Daniel felt something shift inside him. The same resolve he'd felt 10 years ago, when he opened his workshop door to 2 frightened children. The chair's rings of light rose slowly, wrapping Daniel in a soft glow. He felt warmth spread through his chest, not like heat from a fire, but like something alive moving in his veins. Old aches faded, his breath grew easier, his mind clearer. By the time the light faded, he stood straighter, his hands steady as stone. The taller one handed him a small silver band, smooth and cool to the touch. "Put it on," they said. "You're linked to the ship now." As soon as it touched his skin, his vision expanded. He saw not only the chamber around him, but also the starship's corridors, the shield status, and the position of every enemy vessel in orbit. It was overwhelming, but the connection carried no fear, only purpose. The raiders began their attack in full, beams of red and gold cutting across the black. The starship's shields flared under the impact, sending ripples of light across the windows. Daniel could feel the strain through the silver band, like pressure building in the air. Target grid gamma. The smaller one called energy cannons on the ship's flanks unleashed arcs of blue fire, slicing through the first wave of attackers. Below, the colony lay under the shadow of the battle. Daniel's thoughts flashed to the people there, miners dropping tools, children staring at the sky, families huddled in fear. He tightened his grip on the railing. "We hold the line," he said, his voice steady. "No one touches them." The enemy ships swarmed, faster now, but the starship moved like a living thing, rolling and weaving between blasts. Its cannons fired in perfect rhythm, guided by the combined skill of the two commanders and Daniel's sudden link to the vessel. One by one, enemy ships exploded into fragments that burned briefly before fading into the void. When the last raider fled into the darkness, silence returned to space. Daniel felt the ship's tension ease through the band. The taller one turned to him, a rare smile crossing their face. "You didn't just save us this time," they said. "You saved an entire world." The ship descended slowly toward the colony, landing once more in the dusty field. People poured into the open, cheering, their fear replaced by disbelief and joy. Daniel stepped out with the two commanders at his side. The same people who had once barely noticed him now looked at him as if he were something more. The smaller one leaned closer, their voice quiet so only he could hear. "When you helped us, you never asked for anything," they said. "Now you have everything we can give, and a place among the stars." Daniel looked at the colony, then at the massive ship waiting behind him. For the first time in years, the choice before him felt like freedom. He smiled faintly, his eyes on the horizon. "I think," he said, "it's time I saw what else is out there." And as the ramp closed and the ship lifted toward the heavens, the dust of the old colony swirled below. The man who once gave bread and shelter to two lost children now left as a protector, carrying the proof that kindness, once given, never truly fades.